"What are you doing here?" I shouted over to him, trying to get some sort of explanation out of him. Rose's mother said, as she took a roast out of the oven, beginning to prepare it for its plate. Your father stopped laughing for just long enough to ask me what I was doing there. I, of course, responded with, "This is Sky-Ray territory. There's nothing unusual at all about me being here. You are miles outside of Okar territory." Your father simply continued to laugh, saying, "Well, there isn't any law against me being here. The territories may define what places are ours, but there's nothing in any sort of agreement that says we can't travel outside them. It's not as if we're at war. I just decided to take a stroll, that's all," your father said, with a big cheesy smile on his face. "Sorry, I couldn't resist myself. I saw you picking fruit there, and you didn't notice me at all. And I wasn't exactly being quiet. You Sky-Ray sure are relaxed. No way at all I'd be able to sneak up on an Okar like that. So, when the opportunity presented itself, I just couldn't help myself. And your reaction was priceless," he said as he offered his hand down to me, which I batted away. "I don't need your help," I replied, still extremely wary of this Okar appearing out of nowhere. "So where are the rest of them?" I shouted out to him. "The rest of who?" he replied, beginning to look around as if he was looking for someone. "The rest of the Okar with you. You travel in parties. I know that much," I said to him, expecting for him to act surprised that I had figured him out. But he just looked at me as if I had said the strangest thing in the world, giving me a curious expression. After which, "No, there's no party. I'm here by myself. I just figured I'd go out exploring a bit. It gets so dull stalking the same woods over and over again. I thought I'd spice things up. I've actually been traveling a great deal. I recently passed through Barif territory. They were, well, less than welcoming. But man, you should have seen their faces. It was priceless," he said, going back to that cavalier grin of his, Rose's mother said as she continued the story. He went on to tell me about his traveling escapades, that without order, without direction, without purpose, he simply left his village and began wandering about. At first, I distrusted him heavily, thinking for sure that some Okar was going to hop out of the bushes, that perhaps they were thinking of making some sort of move. There had been some disagreements with the Okar as of late, but no official conflicts had been set into place. Mainly it was a dispute, one about maintaining the natural order, which tends to be what we argue about. There was a certain species that was becoming far too prevalent, and were beginning to, well, drink the well dry. Specific territories were having considerable problems with them, interfering with other species, causing issues. The species actually originated from Sky-Ray territory, and were an important part of the natural ecosystem there. But as they spread out, they were causing problems. That is, in fact, what actually caused the conflict between our people, bringing everything to a boiling point. The Okar wished to perform what they considered their natural duty to the balance, what they call a cleansing, a grand hunt. It is an event in which the Okar, as parishioners of death and devour, would mobilize as a single people, like an army, and go on what they call a grand hunt, or cleansing. Basically, they would create a time frame, for example, 1 week, and within this 1 week time frame, they would go on a never-ending hunt, every hour of every day, with one sole target. Whatever creature was decided to be a problem to have begun overpopulating would be hunted by every single Okar that exists. They would hunt without sleep or rest, devouring every single one that they came across. Long after their appetites were sated, the hunt would continue until such time as the allotted time was reached. Such they viewed as their place within the balance, maintaining the ecosystem by controlling the spread of specific organisms, devouring them if they become too prevalent. The Sky Ray thought that the creatures were too important to the ecosystem of our territory. And as I said before, creating living organisms is not something that we can do, especially with any measure of ease. True enough, if we gather enough of us, it can be done, but even then, it is an exhausting task. So the debate had begun between the Sky Ray and the Okar of if there was to be a cleansing hunt, a grand hunt, what exactly the time limit would be. How long would they feast before it came to an end? If it was allowed to go on too long, their numbers would dwindle to a level that was dangerous for the environment in which the Sky Ray lived. Not long enough, and the problem would simply persist. Other territories and races beginning to clamor, demanding that the Okar right the wrong. Such was their place within our society, to maintain the balance by devouring that which becomes overabundant, and therefore a detriment to the balance. If something was not done, the Okar would be held responsible, blamed for it, and accused of not fulfilling their place within the balance. So there was a great deal of pressure on them as well. But your father had struck out on his own, and was not well informed on the nature of current events. He simply didn't care. He was wandering, which basically everyone thought to be, well, mad. All of the peoples of our home world, to us, the balance is everything. And in essence, you could say that the balance is equatable to the religion of our home world. The belief that all of us, despite our different races and predilections, all agree on that the balance is what is most important, that it is our purpose to maintain that balance. So a single Okar, leaving behind the balance itself, wandering out randomly, uncontrolled, without any thought towards the balance, or whether his people needed him or wanted him. It just seemed like madness. And yet, as your father began speaking to me, telling me stories, my wariness slowly began to fade away. The more he spoke, the more I became enthralled with the things that he said, the stories that he told, and the energy with which he told them. Stories of conflict, of practical jokes, of serious situations that he made light of as if they were nothing. Soon enough, I found myself laughing at them right along with him. Somehow, he had a way of putting me at ease, of making me feel joyous. Your father filled my life with laughter. From then on, he began visiting me regularly. I would often have to make trips outside of the village in order to gather supplies, as was part of my job. And your father had made himself at home somewhere on the outskirts, and started becoming accustomed to coming and speaking with me whilst I was outside of the village. Slowly we began to spend more and more time together, laughing and telling stories. And though I probably wouldn't have admitted it at the time, I had already started to become quite infatuated with your father. The way he made me feel simply lit up my world, as if the dull regularities of my day were simply swept away by his presence. And he was quite handsome. that probably didn't hurt him at all. A rather debonair man with red hair that was long and seemingly unkempt, wearing traditional Okar clothing. Very basic, not very showy, more function than fashion. And, well, eventually, one thing led to another, and me and your father became, well, intimate. Our relationship, one of love and affection. This was not a common thing. It wasn't illegal by any measure, but by our nature and the balance that, as I told you, is sort of like our religion. The Okar and the Sky Ray, just like all of the other races, were meant to be separate, for each one of us had an individual purpose within that balance. Many saw trying to have a relationship with someone outside of your race as a disturbance to that balance, to the specific function of each individual race. And once the conflict between the Sky Ray and the Okar went into full swing, I'm afraid at that point, the distinction between the two became even more important to the people surrounding us. At the time, we had managed to keep our relationship a secret, just between me and him. That was until Mala arrived. Mala? Who is that? Well, to be specific, Mala was... well, she was your father's wife. At that point, Rose spit out all of the food in her mouth. What? His wife? I mean, I thought you were his wife, or girlfriend or whatever, Rose said, completely blown away by what she considered to be a major bomb that just got dropped.